Hello, my name is Jeb Justice. I'm an associate professor here at the University of Florida in Gainesville. I've been part of the Smell Disorders Clinic for about 6 years. Excuse me while I get this into presentation mode. Thanks for listening. I'm going to give a brief talk on the importance of smell. I've been involved in the U.S. Smell Disorders Clinic for about 6 years, and it's been very interesting to see. When we first started, there was not a lot of press or emphasis on loss of sense of smell. So a lot of the things I heard from patients were, my friends, my family don't understand what I'm going through, or they think that I'm, making things up. They don't really believe that someone can lose their sense of smell. So it's very frustrating for these patients. I think one of the, even though the pandemic was painful, one of the small benefits that came out of this was more media coverage and emphasis that the sense of smell loss was real, and that it does have a big impact on patients' lives and quality of life. So I want to delve into that a little bit, look at some evidence, just real quick disclosures. These should not impact this talk. Consultant for Intersect and Medtronic. Medtronic just bought Intersect, and this should not be relevant today. So overview, some of my objectives are look at, we have sense of smell for a reason. It keeps us safe, and I'll talk a little bit about that. A lot of patients will tell you that they've lost their sense of taste. So I want to distinguish between taste and flavor, even though this is a talk on smell, and how the loss of smell really causes that or impacts that. So we'll go through that a little bit. The main focus I want to talk about is the quality of life, mental health implications of losing your sense of smell, and how it impacts your ability to connect to other humans. And then I'll briefly touch on treatment and support groups at the end. So I think it's important to know background. I'm going to use COD to refer to chronic olfactory dysfunction. And so if you look at NIDCD data, so that's National Institute for Deafness and Other Communication Disorders. And so they actually track data on this, including sense of smell. Pre-pandemic, about 4%. So, not a huge number of people in their 40s suffer from COD, but once you get up over 80, it's pretty high, approaching 40%. And overall, it's estimated a little bit over 13 million people pre-pandemic over the age of 40 suffered from COD. Estimates now are adding more than 1 million of these per year, especially in younger age groups. So our big concern is, as you see these data and how this affects quality of life, is that COD may be impacting a younger population, and therefore these patients may suffer from a longer duration of disease burden. So it's important for us to understand this, validate their concerns, and try to point them in the right direction. All right, so it's important to know etiologies. This is not a talk on different etiologies and or treatments of loss of smell, but it is important to know what they are. So the most common things I see is post-viral. Even before the pandemic, we saw a lot of things after flu and regular rhinovirus, coronavirus. Any sinonasal or allergic disease, inflammatory disease. We see a lot of post-traumatic brain injury. Smell dysfunction can also be from endocrine dysfunction, side effects of medication, age-related. Loss of sense of smell can be one of the first signs of Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, so it's very common in neurodegenerative disease. And then congenital, I don't see a lot, but we do see a few. I probably see 4 or 5 per year. So with regards to safety, right, we said we have a sense of smell for a reason, right? It keeps us safe. We can smell smoke, it alerts us to fires, burning food, gas leak, spoiled foods that might be unhealthy for us. And it's actually really important for childcare. As a parent of 3 boys, luckily of those 3, we only had 2 bouts of diaper rash, but they were bad. And I can tell you, it's really important to know when to change your child's diaper or whoever you're taking care of. And your sense of smell is really, really important in that arena. So some recommendations, these are things that we give to patients when we see them or they're leaving our office. So make sure you have updated active smoke alarms, check the batteries frequently. get your gas appliance service regularly, label your perishable foods. You have to ask for help, ask family and friends to be your nose, whether that's with your body odor, your trash cans, your food. And I'll give you an example, a patient experience with that towards the end of the talk. Again, even if you're caring for kids, you want to check the diapers regularly to make sure you're not missing anything. And really, also, you got to monitor your weight. I take care of a lot of sinus cancer patients who've undergone either surgery that removed part of their smell apparatus or have had radiation to the skull base and they lose their sense of smell, and they do not, it impacts their sense of flavor. They don't enjoy food, and it's really hard for them to keep their weight on. And that's obviously important if they're going through or just finishing cancer treatments. All right, so I don't want to dwell on this, but it's very important to understand the difference between flavor and taste, because taste is actually distinct. It's just the taste buds that detect sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. Those you can still have working well in a situation where you lose your sense of smell. Patients will tell you they've lost their sense of taste. What they really mean is they've lost their ability to experience flavor. So flavor is a much more complex experience for one's brain. It involves those taste buds from the tongue at the same time that you're smelling what you're eating. And then as you chew and swallow, you get some retronasal olfaction coming up behind the palate in the back of the nose that stimulates the smell receptors as you're tasting it. And all this input to the brain, including the social and emotional aspects of however you take your meals, is what really gives someone a flavor with regards to their memory and their positive experiences with flavor of food. Okay. So even though the patients will say they lost their taste, what they mean is in the situation where they lost their smell, they've actually lost their ability to enjoy flavor. And they'll tell you, yeah, I can still taste sweet, sour, salt, and bitter, but I've lost basically the color and the fun experience of having that. All right. So these are obviously not the most common jobs or vocations in the world, but for your patients who do, are chefs, firefighters, plumbers, wine critics, sommeliers, their sense of smell is their moneymaker, or it keeps them safe during their job. So it's a big deal for someone who does these jobs to lose their sense of smell. I didn't know this, but for you wine fans or connoisseurs, this is Mark Almert, who apparently won the International Award for Best Sommelier in 2021. Okay, so I haven't finished this book, but I've started it. If you have time, it's very interesting. The Emperor of Scent by Chandler Burr is about Luca Turin, who was a scientist, really interested in the sense of smell. And as he learned more about it, and he was in the perfume business over in Europe, he came up with his own hypothesis of how human smell worked, or how our neurons and brains processed for our sense of smell. And he has not proven this yet, but what is interesting in the book is as he goes along his journey of trying to figure this out, how much, I guess I would say, resistance he comes up against from powerful people, including corporations who have a very vested interest in understanding, manufacturing, and controlling molecules that deal with smell and our ability to detect them. And so what that made me think of was really the economic impact of sense of smell, or the losses of sense of smell. So if you think about big corporations and how many billions of dollars transacted worldwide annually in the perfume, cologne, food, beverage, wine industries, I mean, this is massive. And so I encourage you to check out this book, but just know that, there are many, many people trying to understand the sense of smell, how it works, and how they can alter substances to make us want to buy them more. All right, so let's get into a little bit of the data. This was a nice study out of VCU in Richmond in 2014, Dr. Costanzo's group and Larry DiNardo, looking at the incidence of hazardous events for patients who had lost their sense of smell. And so those hazardous events are defined. You can see burning pots and pans, ingesting spoiled food, undetected smoke or gas leak, or starting a fire while cooking. And over here on the bottom left, you see that the people with the worst sense of smell had the highest incidence of those. And as the smell got better, those incidents went down. So obviously these events are not happening to people with great frequency, but when they do happen, they can have severe consequences. So this is a huge worry for patients who have lost their sense of smell when you talk to them. So we should be aware of this. All right, next I'm going to start into the mental health aspects. This is a nice study out of Charleston, South Carolina, Medical University of South Carolina, Rod Schlosser's group, looking at relationship of olfaction and depression. And as we'd expect, it's a bummer. So you would imagine people get a little bit depressed when they lose their sense of smell. But they were able to show that these patients with olfactory dysfunction have symptoms of depression, and that actually worsen as the severity of smell loss gets worse. And they were able to find that just having depression alone is associated with decreased olfaction. So it may be that it works both ways. As you get depressed, there may be something going on in the brain that leads to less ability to smell. All right, so we talked about mental health, but this was really kind of a deeper dive into quality of life. So this is a study from last year, 2021, the chemical senses, that really looked at our close relationships and how their links to olfactory compare. So they divided this into family relationships, friendship, and then romantic. And so just to go through a few of the important ones, so the bonding and attachment in family. So mothers who had decreased sense of smell found a little bit more difficult to bond with their children when they're unable to identify the infant's odor. In the friendship relationships, and this again is huge with regards to social isolation. Anosmic patients report they avoid eating with others. Hygiene concerns, anosmics report more concern about how others might perceive their body odors. And I've had actually patients tell me about this, especially if they are in the dating scene, right? They don't want someone that they might be newly dating to think that they smell bad. And then in the social functioning and support, persons with worse olfactory function were more likely to report loneliness. And so this is, at the end, I'll emphasize that it's really important to direct patients to support groups because of this reason. And finally, in romantic relationships, we already talked a little bit about it. It's actually probably helpful to ask your spouse or romantic partner to be your nose, help smell and taste things to make sure they're not spoiled. Sexual behaviors, anosmic men have less sexual partners, and anosmic women experience decreased partnership security. And then the last one, social functioning, the body odor of a partner has the capacity to alter stress levels. So you can see this has a major impact on these patients' daily quality of life, can lead to anxiety and worry over how others might perceive them. So finally, this is a study from last year, 2021, the Journal of Sexual Medicine. So again, with that idea of romantic relationships, which I think is important to a lot of people, they found that loss of sense of smells associated with decreased sexual motivation and less emotional satisfaction with sex. And so again, major impact to patients' quality of life. So I want to try to play this video, which is about 50 seconds, to just give a patient perspective. This is me asking my patient at the beginning to talk about her experience with her loss of smell, which has impacted her flavor as well. So what has it been like losing your sense of smell and taste, and how's that impacted your daily life?
So I have my sense of taste, although I don't think that it's reliable, but at least I can taste. My smell's been gone. I hate it being gone, because there's just, I go to check to see if food is bad in the refrigerator and I put it up to my nose to smell it and I can't smell anything. If the trash in my trash can is a little bad. I don't know it. And my son will come in and say, oh, Mom, you need to take that trash out. And so just those kind of things. I have big flowering bushes that I just love in my yard. I can't smell those. So it's very frustrating. It's
So you can see, and she did a nice job of giving examples of how it impacts her daily life, and also touched on the fact that her taste seems to still be there, but she doesn't trust it. Okay, so finally moving on, there are treatments. Now, remember, we talked about some etiologies. Treatment depends on the etiology of the smell loss. Obviously, if you have sinonasal disease, allergic disease, inflammatory disease, we treat this typically with medications, plus minus surgery. There's any endocrine issue that needs to be addressed. If there's any medication side effect, we need to stop that and look for alternatives. In the post-viral, which is what we're seeing most commonly now, evidence-based medicine has shown that steroid sinus irrigations, in addition to smell retraining therapy, is best. And the reason those are nice too is that they are relatively low risk compared, when you think about other treatments, we offer people antibiotic steroid surgery. Rinsing your nose with a steroid and doing smell retraining therapy has almost zero risk compared to those. I threw stellate ganglion block on here. Now we're hearing anecdotal reports, and we're offering this to people who failed everything else. The jury's still out on this. I don't, as much as I've read on this, I still don't understand why this particular block would work for post-viral sense of smell, but there's anecdotal reports that it does. So it's worth investigating, but right now we're telling patients it's available, but it's experimental. I tend to direct patients to Fifth Sense. This is a nonprofit charity out of the United Kingdom. It's really great website for resources, treatments, new research, and really importantly, support groups. It's a great way for patients to connect, share experiences, show camaraderie with each other, share recipes that they've used that enhance their ability to enjoy meals. So if you don't have this website, please direct your patients there. It's a great resource. So in summary, I hope that this helped shine a little light on how smell dysfunction can really decrease patients' quality of life and put them at safety risks. I think it's really important to validate their concerns. I can't tell you, 90% of the patients I see in smell clinics say, I saw several other doctors, they dismissed me and said, there's nothing I can do, see you later. I can't tell you how simply saying to a patient, we've seen this before, I understand what you're going through, and it's a real thing. Half the patients just want to hear some physician say that, and then they're able to cope with their symptom a lot better. And so finally, because of the depression and the potential social isolation, I think it's very important that patients should be connected with support groups and offered coping strategies. So with that being said, thank you for listening, and hope to see everybody at the conference. And please stop me if there's any questions, comments, or concerns. Thanks very much.